In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to repair a twist in an I-cord without having to rip any of your work back. This can be done on any project where an I-cord is at the edge of the work that has not already been bound off, so you want to make sure that the stitches above the twist are still available to be dropped down. I have found it's really helpful that your working yarn that is still attached to your ball be at the opposite end of the work from the I-cord that you're trying to repair, or at least a few stitches out of the way, just to avoid it getting too strandy, having too many pieces of yarn in the way as we're trying to repair this. So the tools that you're going to want to consider having on hand for this skill is either a fix-it tool. If you don't have a fix-it tool, a small crochet hook that's going to be useful for the size of yarn on your project, as well as 2 locking markers. They don't have to be this fine, but the smaller the yarn that your project is using, the smaller in gauge you're going to want your stitch markers to be. A twist in your I-cord will most commonly occur when you've had to frog your work and put your stitches back on the needle. The orientation of the I-cord itself is often very confusing because we're pulling the yarn behind to create our tube. Very often we want to put our stitches back in the opposite direction. We can see here that there is a twist in the I-cord because we have a nice seamless I-cord running up to this point, and now all of a sudden we're seeing the wrong side of it. So let's look at the steps that I recommend you follow to pull back the stitches in your I-cord without impacting the stitches in your work. So the first thing we're going to do is get all of those stitches over to the right tip of our needle so we can drop them down. I don't recommend dropping them all at once. I recommend going slow and using caution and using your stitch markers. Now my twist is only about 5 rows down, so I've got 1 on the needle, 2, 3, 4, 5 before my twist. If yours is significantly further down, go really slow. This will still work. It'll just take a little bit more patience. So the first thing we're going to do is I am going to pull this outermost stitch off and drop it down. So I'm going to drop this down, pulling out the loops that are going through it until I get to the twist. This is where a little tip of a fix-it tool or a needle can become really handy. So now I'm down to my twist. So I'm going to pull this, or put this live stitch that I just dropped down onto a locking marker. Next, you can either place this on a locking marker or on a separate needle. I'm just going to put it onto my spare needle. This is the center stitch of your I-cord. We're just going to move that out of the way. Now we're going to repeat the drop down process with the final stitch of our I-cord, or what I think of as the inside stitch, the stitch closest to the face of the work. So we're going to pull that off and drop down using your tool to pull out those loops as needed. So make sure you grab this one before it disappears on you. So we're now down to our twist. We're going to put this on my locking marker so that we have 2 sets of stitches on our locking marker. 1 on each side. And you can see that the work itself wants to twist. This was the stitch that was on the back side. This is the stitch that was on the front side. So to fix it, we're going to kind of weasel it through using the tip of our stitch markers. We're going to weasel it through to the back of the work through the I-cord. And we're just going to pull it through. So now our stitches are on opposite sides. You can see the one on the back is now in line with the stitches below it, and the one on the front is also in line with the stitches below it. Now what we're going to do is use our fix-it tool or our crochet hook, whichever one you have on hand, to pick the stitches back up to the height of the needle. So with the one closest to the work first, I'm going to remove the marker, put that stitch back on my Fix-It tool, and I'm going to pick up, but we're going to see we've got a lot of yarns here. What we want to look for are the ones that are attached to the front stitch. This loop here is attached to the front of our work. This loop here is not. It's pulling from the back. So as we lift up our stitches, we want to be sure that we're picking up only the bars that are attached to the front. So this one here is attached to the front, so I'm going to pull that through. This one is not attached to the front, but this one is. So I'm going to pull that one through. This one is not attached to the front, but this one is, so I'm going to pull it through. One more time, this one is not a front one, but this one, oops, but this one here is. So I'm going to put that back on my needle. And this is going to look a little wobbly for a little while. That's okay. Now, the center stitch, because we didn't do anything with it, we're just going to put it back on the needle. I had it on this spare needle, but it fell off while I was repairing. We're going to repeat the process with the stitch on the back. It's in line with the column below it, so we're going to repeat the process. We're going to remove the locking marker, place our Fix-It tool in it, making sure there's no twist in the stitch, and then we're going to pick up using the bars that are attached to the back. So we've got this loop here, this loop here, a third one here, and a fourth one here. And this can now be placed back on our working needle in the correct orientation. So now that I have repaired the two outside stitches of our I-cord, one last step remains. The center stitch in our I-cord column is going to have a twist in it where we changed the direction of our stitches. So the final step is going to be removing our outermost stitch that we just put back on the needle, dropping down to the twist and removing it. So just to repeat the process, we're going to put our final stitch on a locking marker. This is the rightmost stitch. And we're going to let this just fall off the needle. Because it's on the marker, it can't go anywhere. Next, we're going to drop that center stitch off and pull the stitches down to the twist in our I-cord. For me, this should be 4 loops down because it was the 5th row where I had the twist in my I-cord. Okay, so there's the 4th one. So here we are at the twisted stitch. I'm now going to correct the orientation of that stitch so there's no longer a twist in it, and simply pick the stitches back up, going up the rows that I just pulled out. 2, 3, and 4 is going to be right at the top. So I'm going to place that back on the needle in the 2nd position, pull the 3rd stitch back and put it on my needle in the correct orientation. Whoops. And there we go. I have fixed my I-cord without having to rip any of the work out of it. Some of your stitches are going to be a little bit wobbly because you've adjusted the tension of them as you did the repair work, but none of them are twisted and you didn't have to do any work to impact the remaining stitches on your needle, meaning you didn't have to frog them at all. So there you go. I hope that helps you repair your I-cord, and as always, happy knitting.